Good morning. And welcome. Welcome to this gathering of the family of Jesus. We gather on lands walked for thousands of years by people of the First Nations. We acknowledge the history, culture, and spirituality of the signatories to Treaty 6 and remember our responsibility as treaty members. We also honor the heritage and gifts of Métis people. May we live the respect that our words offer. In the name of Jesus, peace to you.
And also with you.
To live with God is to live with love and respect for God, for ourselves, and for all the world around us. So we set aside this time to gather, to praise and pray, to learn and ask questions, to share and renew our spirits. But this is not the only time, nor the only place in which we live. From the beginning and until the end, we are called to love God and to love each other as we would love ourselves in every moment, everywhere. It's not always easy or comfortable. Sometimes it feels not even possible. Sometimes we may fail. But God invites us to remember in every moment, everywhere, that God is with us. We are not alone. Let us pray together. As on a first day you began the work of creating us, as on a first day you raised your Son from the dead, so on this first day, O God, freshen and remake us, and as the week is new, let our lives begin again because of Jesus, who shows us your loving power. Amen. I'd like to invite the children, anyone who's feeling childlike. Grant, do you want to come join us up front? Because you'll like this. You will. Okay. Because I'm going to I'm going to do something. I'm going to do something that's going to make Damien really nervous. Because he's going to have to move the camera, maybe. I don't know. Hi. We're all going to lie on the floor. Everybody lie on the floor. Stare at the ceiling. Everyone's staring at the ceiling?
No, I'm staring at you.
Why? The ceiling is so much more interesting.
No, you are.
Look, there's a little like, it's almost like there's a little, there's maybe a hole like right there in the ceiling.
No, there isn't. I don't see anything.
You don't see anything?
No, I don't see anything.
Nothing.
I only see
What do you see?
I see the
Lights? You see the ceiling. Excellent. So have you ever lied on the grass outside and like looked up at the sky and like you see the clouds and you think they look like stuff?
No, I can't do that because of the sun. I did that.
You can't do that because of the sun.
Because my eyes are sensitive to light.
Oh, I see. I suppose now you're going to also tell me that right now we're not looking at the sky anyway because that's the ceiling.
Yeah, I don't like to put my head up straight.
Okay.
To the side.
Okay, so here though, there's no, okay, there's lights still, yeah, okay. But if you were to look straight up, what do you see?
Nothing.
Oh, no. No. What do you see really? Pretend the ceiling's not here and you can see the sky.
No, I don't see anything.
What if you could see past the sky and you could see out into space? Like you could see stars and planets and all sorts of cool
I see nothing
stuff.
but you.
Well, I am deeply honored by that.
Because you are a planet.
I'm a planet? Okay, well, this is definitely a moment where I don't really know what to say. But okay, maybe I am a planet. Actually, you know what? Maybe I am a planet. Maybe we're all planets. Maybe we're all planets out in space.
No, we're not even.
We're all just floating around out in space.
No, we are
We could be. What if there were stars? Oh, those lights off to the side, they were stars. And this was like we were all planets floating around out in space. They're my head? Okay.
Yeah.
Could be. All right, let's all sit up if we can. Okay. Okay. How do you feel now?
Bad.
You feel bad? How come?
Because of the bite our head, they were hurting on the floor.
The floor's too hard?
I was there.
Okay, well, that didn't work.
My sister making me late.
I really thought that would work. Okay, let's try this one. Okay, everybody stand up, please. Okay, we're going to do some jumping jacks. Everybody go like this. That's as many as I can do. Excellent. Okay, good. All right, everybody stop now. How do you feel now?
Bad.
What do you mean bad? What could we possibly do that would make you feel good?
Fly in a spaceship to outer space.
But we just did that lying on the floor.
No, that's
we did.
That's not space.
Well, see, okay, let's sit down again. Let's sit down again. Okay. Sometimes, like you know how when you're asleep, you know how when you're asleep and then you wake up in the morning and everybody wakes up bright and refreshed and is eager to get out of bed and start the day.
No.
That was a good one.
I'm really tired then.
Of course you are,
Because
because you're just sleeping. See, sometimes in order to feel like really refreshed or really like have like lots of energy and stuff, you actually have to do something. And for some people that's like getting exercise. So that's not for me, obviously. But for some people it's just like imagining stuff. Like if you just kind of lie in the grass and stare at the sky and imagine what's going on up there, you know, and think about what's going on in the world. Maybe just go for a walk in the woods. Sometimes people like to go for a walk. Who likes to go for a walk in the woods? Who likes to go for a walk? Like, do you like going, if you live on a farm, do you like going out, like just out in a field somewhere and just kind of being by yourself a little bit sometimes? Do you feel like doing that? Especially when, say, your siblings are bugging you. But sometimes you need to do stuff like that just to feel and then you feel good afterwards, right? Right? And see, I think God always wants us to take time and make sure that we do stuff like that. Not just sleep, but it's something that makes you feel really good afterwards, right? And sometimes that's playing a game, or sometimes it's just having a rest, right? Sometimes it's read a book. Read a book. It's such an awesome thing, right?
Yeah, and watch an
Sometimes it's watching a show or something on your iPad. Any of those things that help you feel a little bit better afterwards. You know what it is? Playing games. You know what it is about that makes you feel so good afterwards? It's because you feel connected to stuff, right? Like when you're watching something, right? You're reading a book, or you're staring at the sky. Your mind's working, right? It's thinking about stuff. It's imagining. It's creating stuff. When you're exercising, your body's doing that, right? If you go for a walk, or do some jumping jacks, if you can do more than 3. It can help. It helps you connect yourself to the world, to the universe, to God even. Right? That's what's so cool about it, is that you feel connected to things, and that's the thing that helps you feel much more energized, much kind of refreshed, like you're ready to take on the rest of the day. Right? That's why when you sit here and you listen to me talk, and then you're like, and then you go somewhere with Lori and you do something super cool, and after that, you guys like come upstairs or you come back inside, after you're like, yay! Like you're just like supercharged, right? It's because she's cool and fun and interesting. But I'm not. I'm not really. Yeah. 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 So we should do more of that, right? Yeah. Right now, all the adults are thinking that too. They like to go off with Lori and do whatever it is you're doing today. I'm not sure what it is, but it's going to be cool. Oh, awesome. Cool. Yeah. Oh, wait till you see. But the thing about all of that is it helps us be more of who we are and where we are in the world. And it helps us be more connected with God. It helps us be like the church. It helps us be like it does, really honest. Okay, he'll have a sheep, he'll be fine. It helps us be just like the church, right? I mean, it looks like it's a building, right? It looks like it's a building, but when people come into it and do things in it, how do you feel about that?
Bad.
What do you mean bad? How could you possibly feel bad about that?
Feel like God.
You feel good, don't you?
No, like God.
She means good. You feel like God?
Good.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
God.
Absolutely. You do. Whatever it is, that's why we're here. Whether it's something that's happy or sad, whether we're playing a game or whether we're listening to Robin talk really way too long, whatever it is, when we get together with everybody else and we do this thing that we do here together, this church thing, and then we leave feeling better, even if we've had a nap. I'm not looking at anybody out there in particular, but we feel better about it. That's why we have this place set aside to do that. Have I told you what sanctuary is before?
Yes, I know what it is.
What is it? It was in the play because of the play. See all of the things you learn. And where was the play? Where was the play? Where was it?
Here.
Yes, it was. Absolutely. Sanctuary is a place you go to do that stuff, right? And what it does, it helps us be that very thing. So we got a little song this morning. I think we've done this little song before, actually. We got a little song this morning. It goes like this. God, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. That sounds pretty easy, doesn't it? We can all do that. I think we can all do that. And there's lots of words in this that probably need some explanation. So Lori and Brielle and Pinoca, I'm sure you guys are going to explain all of those things. No pressure. Okay, here we go. And all the folks out there are going to help us sing it. Okay, so let's try it. God, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. We should do it again. God, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. You're going to feel much more refreshed and energized after you go downstairs or outside or do whatever. Yeah, honestly, yeah, okay. Thank you, guys. Thanks for listening. Off you go. Bye. Ben, you have to stay. Sorry, that's kind of... Nice purse, though. Yeah, sure. Let us pray. Open our hearts, open our minds, open our lives to you, O loving God. Amen.
I have two scripture readings for you today. The first one is from Deuteronomy. And the Ten Commandments appear in both Exodus and Deuteronomy. The Exodus is the story of Moses and the people receiving the commandments from God early in their wilderness journey, fresh from their slavery in Egypt. The restatement in Deuteronomy is the new generation about to enter the promised land. And these verses are saying, regarding the Sabbath, it's more than a day off. So it's Deuteronomy 5:12-15. Observe the Sabbath and keep it holy, as I, the Lord your God, have commanded you. You have 6 days in which to do your work, but the seventh day is a day of rest dedicated to me. On that day, no one is to work. Neither you, your children, your slaves, your animals, nor the foreigners who live in your country. Your slaves must rest just as you do. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that I, the Lord your God, rescued you by my great power and strength. That is why I command you to observe the Sabbath. Our second reading today is from Mark. In these two scenes in Mark, Jesus challenges the strict observance of the Sabbath that would cause hardship to stand in the way of doing good. Once again, the heart of the law is being lost in practice. After all, the Sabbath is for our needs. We don't serve the Sabbath by observing it. Once again, Jesus is in conflict with the Pharisees. So we're reading from Mark 2, verses 23 right through to chapter 3, verse 6. Jesus was walking through some wheat fields on a Sabbath. As his disciples walked along with them, they began to pick the heads of the wheat. So the Pharisees said to Jesus, "Look, it is against our law for your disciples to do that on the Sabbath." Jesus answered, "Have you never read what David did that time when he needed something to eat? He and his men were hungry, so he went into the house of the Lord and ate the bread offered to God. This happened when Abiathar was the high priest. According to our law, only the priests may eat this bread. But David ate it and even gave it to his men." And Jesus concluded, "The Sabbath was made for the good of man. Man was not made for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord, even on the Sabbath." Then Jesus went back to the synagogue where there was a man who had a paralyzed hand. Some people were there who wanted to accuse Jesus of doing wrong. So they watched him closely to see whether he would cure the man on the Sabbath. Jesus said to the man, "Come up here to the front." Then he asked the people, "What does our law allow us to do on the Sabbath? To help or to harm? to save a man's life or to destroy it? But they did not say a thing. Jesus was angry as he looked around at them, but at the same time, he felt sorry for them because they were so stubborn and wrong. Then he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and it became well again. So the Pharisees left the synagogue and met at once with some members of Herod's party, and they made plans to kill Jesus.
Let us pray. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our hope. Amen. Do you think he's doing it on purpose? Jesus, do you think he's going out of his way to annoy people on purpose? I'm just asking because actually that's been on my mind a lot lately. But you read this story, and it appears as though Jesus is doing things, and the disciples are doing things on the Sabbath, and it annoys the authorities. But it kind of appears like he's doing it on purpose. And if they were picking the heads off the grain, okay, so they were collecting grain. What are the guys going to do with it? In the first century, those guys wouldn't have known how to do anything with that. Some of them were fishermen, some of them, one was a tax collector, they had other jobs, but how would they have known what to do with a bunch of grain? They would have had to get somebody else, or they might have sold it. Either way, they're working. It's almost like they knew they were being watched, and they did it on purpose. Jesus goes into the temple and heals somebody on the Sabbath, knowing it's almost like he's going, are they looking? Are they looking? Are they looking? Okay, come over here. Are they looking? Trying to make sure that he's being seen to do it. And then it even says, Mark says, Jesus gets annoyed. He gets mad about it. It's almost like this whole story is like he's spoiling for a fight. Do you think he is? Why not? If not, why not? Where's the line between, is there one, between Jesus just doing what we should do and challenging on purpose? It's an interesting aspect of this story because it raises the question of whether or not Jesus was intentionally going out of his way to cause trouble. Do you think he was? Not Jesus, no. He doesn't get mad either. Right? But he does. And so I just say it's a really interesting way of addressing some of these stories of Jesus. Is Jesus actually just going about being Jesus, like we often describe the story, and how it's an example of how we should live? So is this story an example of how we should live? We should go out of our way to court controversy and try and challenge the authorities? Well, of course we should. Let's all go do that. No, of course not. It's a little on my mind lately because I've said some things lately that have caused some controversy. But I said them simply to say them. Because I think they need to be said. So where's the line, though? You might remember a couple of weeks ago I was talking about that whatever you say, it still has to be heard. And are you aware of how what you're being said is being heard? In fact, how can you be necessarily? Because there's a bunch of people in the room right now, there's a bunch of people watching right now, who all are hearing what I'm saying slightly differently. Am I in fact trying to be controversial? Or am I simply trying to live and say and talk and relate what I think Jesus is about? Does it matter? Does it? I just have questions. I don't really have any answers for those. But we need to think about that. We do need to think about that, because in just a moment I'm going to say something that's going to cause you to think about that. We do need to think about that. We need to be aware that sometimes the stories that we read of Jesus, we read these lovely stories of Jesus doing lovely things and wonderful things, but we also need to be aware that there were other people in that story, in the shadows of the side of that story, who aren't happy about what's going on and perceive Jesus as going out of his way to challenge the order of things. There's even stories that have Jesus saying, I am going out of my way to challenge the order of things. So how does that affect our understanding of the story? Does it affect our understanding of the story in any way? Does it give us an example of how we might tell a story or relate a story in order to challenge the status quo, the order of things? Here's a thought. So this story is, of course, about something that occurs on the Sabbath, and to back that up, we have a passage from Deuteronomy, which is in fact the fourth commandment, and it can be the third or fourth commandment depending on which sort of Christian denomination you are, because some number it differently. But it's the commandment about the Sabbath. So the idea is that the Sabbath is a day of rest. It's the seventh day, right? In Exodus, it's quite clear that the reason for having the Sabbath on the seventh day is because God labored 6 days in creation, and on the seventh day God rested, so we should too. And that makes perfect sense. So let's be absolutely clear, biblically speaking, the Sabbath is Saturday. It is not Sunday. That's right. The Jews, Seventh-day Adventists, and some Eastern churches are right. It's Saturday, is the Sabbath. Technically speaking, we're going to come back to that in a second too, but technically speaking, it is the seventh day. The reason many other denominations think it's the Sunday is because, first of all, when the first followers of Jesus, who were good Jews, were doing their thing initially, they would go to synagogue on Saturday and then have their celebration on the first day. Right? Remember the story of Mary and the women go to the tomb on the first day of the week. It's the day of resurrection. It makes perfect sense that we would have a celebration on the first day of the week, the day of the resurrection. But it's not the Sabbath. The Sabbath is still the seventh day, because 6 days God labored, and on the seventh day, right? So we started having our thing on the first day, and then this is way more complicated than this, but a combination of, we started to focus more on that kind of stuff, and the more traditional Jews started to go, hey, you guys are focusing more on your own thing, go and do that and stay the heck out of our synagogues now. So it became the first day was the day. And then, you remember Constantine, the guy who caused all the problems? Constantine in 321 determined that the day of the sun, the first day of the week, will be the day of rest. The same guy who brought Christianity as the religion of the state determined that Sunday would now be the day of rest. You can see how we then immediately started to think that Sunday was the Sabbath. But it's not, it's Saturday. And yet, he's got a point. Because if you are speaking just technically in terms of biblically the story of 6 days and resting on the seventh day, you're absolutely right, Saturday is the Sabbath. Presuming, of course, that you consider Sunday to be the first day. But if that's the case, then Saturday is very definitely the Sabbath. And let's be clear about Sabbath too. Sabbath is not midnight to midnight. For Jews, Sabbath starts at sundown on Friday, and it goes until, this is really kind of fascinating because I'm not really sure how they actually figured this out if it's cloudy, but it goes to the appearance of 3 stars on Saturday night. Once you can see 3 stars in the sky on Saturday night, Sabbath is over. Okay, so that's Sabbath. And we, of course, we always think a day is midnight to midnight, right? Or sunrise to sundown. So you can see how this is all contributing to the confusion of what actually is Sabbath. But technically, it's Saturday. It's the seventh day. Except, that's assuming you're just going to stick with that particular understanding of what Sabbath is. The day of rest that is determined by the creation story being 6 days and God resting on the seventh day. What if there was more to it, though? What if there was more to it? What if there was more to the idea of Sabbath than it being a specific set-apart period of time? One of the things that makes me think this so strongly is that I was at a meeting the other day where a Seventh-day Adventist pastor was talking about what happens on the Sabbath. And he actually said, it's such an active day. What? But the Sabbath is supposed to be a day of rest, to do nothing. But it's such an active day. So clearly, and don't get me wrong, I think I'm so happy he said that, because he makes the most important point about it, is that Sabbath isn't just sitting around doing nothing. It isn't. In fact, what it's become is a combination of, for most churches, what it's become is a combination of worship, or a gathering of some kind, and a time of rest. Right? But it's become the day of ritual, in other words. Right? Again, using the term Sabbath to mean the technical, this is the day piece, right? But the thing about that is, all of that activity that he was talking about is centered around gathering as a community to meet with God. And that's the thing about saying, oh, it's a day for rest. That means you do nothing. But you can't do nothing. I mean, realistically, think about it. Even when you're sleeping, you're physically resting, whether your mind is or not. Your body is trying to. You can't actually do nothing. Well, you can. You'd be dead. I mean, really, think about it. You can't actually do. You'd have to stop breathing. The essence of life. Right? So, you've got to be doing something. Okay, so when is it rest and when is it just doing nothing? Well, see, it's rest. I think it's rest if it's refreshing and it renews you. It inspires you when you then sort of to get going again. Right? It's the time, and it might be some sleep, but it might also be reading a book, right? Or playing a game, or doing any of those other things that might be life-giving to you. That can create a Sabbath moment. As long as you're aware that when you're doing those things, you're connecting. Right? Because one of those things that refreshes and renews you is the connection, and this is why we gather here. It's a moment to experience, to have a shared experience of God. To understand not just that it's a time set apart, or that it's time for rest, or it's a time for ritual, but it's also a time for our spirits, essentially, to be refreshed by reconnecting, by being re-inspired. Is that even a word? You know what I mean. Inspired by God. By an engagement with God, a moment with God. A God moment. That's why we have these places that we call sacred and holy. Because we've set them apart for that purpose. Which is great, don't get me wrong. That's absolutely super. It's 100% important. But it doesn't mean that this is exclusively the only place. If God is in all creation, then all creation is sacred. That means we can have that holy experience anywhere. So let's all just go out on the street here. We're just going to stand in the middle of the street right here. Everyone coming? No? You're not going to come with? Okay. You're thinking to yourself, cars and trucks will not think that they're having a holy experience, right? They'll just, okay. But that's the thing, is that it's not just about one place or one time or one moment. You can't just kind of say, in order to have a Sabbath experience, you must be in church or a sacred place on Saturday or Sunday or whatever day that you want to label. Because it's more than that. And I know it's more than that for two reasons. Number one is, there's two statements of this commandment. And the one statement of this commandment in Exodus, it concludes with, you should remember the Sabbath because 6 days God labored in creation. On the seventh day God rested. So you should have rest too. But it's restated in Exodus, and it doesn't say that. It doesn't say 6 days God labored and on the seventh day you should rest. That's why there's a Sabbath commandment. It says you should rest on the seventh day because you were once slaves in Egypt and now you are not. You are free. In other words, part of the Sabbath, I think part of the Sabbath isn't just about structure, it's about freedom. It's about the freedom to observe it. The freedom to choose to observe it. Not simply because I told you you should, but because you have the freedom to do so. That means you have the freedom to choose that moment. You have the freedom to make that moment yourself. See, that's the thing about holy and sacred, is that the very first part of the commandment, whether it's in Exodus or Deuteronomy, the very first part of it says, remember or observe in Exodus, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. There are lots, none of them are here, of course, but I'm sure there are lots of people in churches on a Sunday morning who are not keeping the Sabbath holy. Because they're going to walk out of the church and it's not going to have made any difference to them at all in terms of how the week goes. It's just something that they do. But when we gather together and have some kind of an experience of God, a moment of holiness, that's something else. That's a moment of experiencing, I think that's a moment of experiencing not just the rest part, not just the freedom part, but the awareness that we are connected. Not just to each other, but to the earth, to all of creation, to the universe, to God. It's that moment of holiness is that moment of experiencing that oneness, that wholeness, spelling it differently, W-H-O-L-E, wholeness that refreshes us and renews us and helps us move forward. That's what Sabbath is about for me. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with Sabbath is a Saturday, or even the idea that Sabbath is a Sunday. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the idea that Sabbath means you should take a break and rest. It means, to me, that you should find the moment of holiness. That moment of holiness might be happening for you right now. It might be happening because you've nodded off some time ago. It might be because you're not really listening to me, you're actually thinking what you're going to do this afternoon and how cool that's going to be. And that's absolutely fine. That's my point. Is I can't manufacture a moment of holiness for you. No amount of telling people you must gather in a specific building at a specific time of day on a specific day in order to have a moment of holiness, no amount of doing that will make it happen. You make it happen. What makes this place sacred isn't that we commanded it to be so. It's that in all of the sacredness of creation, you have gathered here. That's what makes it holy. People talk about this. I've had this experience. Anybody ever been to Salisbury Cathedral in England? There's a place near there that's called Sarum, which is where the original cathedral was, and it was it's an ancient settlement. Like, it goes back to Iron Age and stuff. It's one of those places where the moment you stand there, you are aware that you are standing on holy ground. Not because somebody told you it was holy, but because you know thousands, millions of people have passed there through thousands of years. It has been a place of gathering. It has been a place of people experiencing holiness together for thousands of years. You can have those experiences. You can have those experiences in Alberta, right? There are traditional First Nations lands where you even just standing there, people have been here. You can't even begin to guess how long ago, but this is a place of sacredness. And what makes it so is that people gather there to experience this together. It's not because somebody said, oh, look, there's a spot on the map that says this is Holy Mountain or something. It's because you experience it. And you experience it because you experience it. I can't manufacture that for you. But if you walk into some of those places, some people have that experience of going into cathedrals or churches in Europe. Some people have it going to places in like those ancient sites in Mexico or in the Middle East or in South America. Places where people have gathered for thousands of years for a particular purpose. And you can feel it. You can. If they had not gathered there, you would not. It needs you. To remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy doesn't simply require someone commanding you to think or understand a certain way, or to even assemble in a certain way, or to behave in a certain way. It requires you to choose to make that moment happen. So you need to, is what I would say to you. You need to. Because that moment of holiness has a purpose. And that purpose isn't just, it's a moment of holiness. That purpose is, that moment of holiness translates into your life forward. How you go forward. It's why some people, and I know you're going to find this hard to believe, but this is true. Some people actually leave church on a Sunday morning refreshed and renewed and ready to start the week. I used to actually say that really sarcastically. Now I know it's absolutely true. I don't know who you are, but there's someone here who is. No, you do, but that's why we do it. And if we're not doing that, we're either doing something wrong or we shouldn't do it. Because that's the point. Creating a moment of holiness that refreshes and renews and moves us forward. There are so many ways to do that. One of them is for us to gather as a community. One of them is for us to gather as a community at a specific time on a Sunday morning and sit in pews. Another might be for us to gather as a community at a specific time, maybe sit in the pews, but do this a little bit differently, say like on a Monday night and call it Contemporary Church. Another way might be for us to gather and create story on the stage here. Another way might be for us to gather to knit or have coffee or have a Bible study. There are so many ways in which we gather as a community that can create those moments. And they create those moments because you are a part of it with God. That's what makes the moment holy. That's what makes this place holy. There is a time in our community prayer this morning for you to name persons or concerns or thanksgivings that you would like us to share as a community. Please feel free to speak boldly at the appropriate time during the prayer. Let us pray. Holy One, in the beginning you breathed over the waters and shaped life in all its diverse beauty. We are grateful witnesses to your abundant love for all creation. We give thanks for the light and the darkness. We give thanks for the land and the waters. We give thanks for plants of all kinds. We give thanks for the moon, the stars, and the sun. We give thanks for all the creatures of the sky, the waters, and the land. We give thanks for this marvelous creation and share in its holiness, echoing your words, "It is good." We ask you to breathe your wisdom into us that we might respect this gift and keep it as our home. May we see your presence in all the wonders that surround us. May we see your presence in caring for your world in need, for the poor and the oppressed, the hungry and the homeless, the sick and the tired, the lonely and the grieving. May we always seek to keep your creation sacred and make it whole. Here today we bring to you those persons, concerns, and thanksgivings that most especially need your love and strength, and we name them now as a community. And now, O God, we are one in prayer, but bring our own thanks and our own concerns. If some need to say, "Help me," or "Save me," or "Hold me," or "Forgive me," then let these be spoken now in the confidence of our hearts in a moment of quiet prayer. These and all our prayers we gather together in the prayer that Jesus taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. We have shared here in a time which is holy, a moment made sacred by our presence here together with God. May we go from here refreshed by the Spirit, inspired to live a life full of hope with justice, compassion, and grace. May we love like Jesus. May we know God's presence in everyone and everything around us. This is our blessing. Amen.
Years of being the change. Our gifts for mission and service support the long-standing ministry of St. Columba's House, a community ministry that is an important constant in the lives of those who are living in the margins of Montreal. The year 2017 marks an important milestone in the history of St. Columba's House. Who would have imagined in 1917 that a century later the ministry would be celebrating 100 years of offering healing and hope to the most vulnerable members of the Point St. Charles community. From its beginning as a place that only provided hot meals to its current status as a leader in changing public policy in Montreal, St. Columba's House has transformed many lives. It is now an organization that on the cutting edge of emerging needs and innovative responses through its environmental programming. This includes a community gardening program whose participants develop their own balcony gardens, a beekeeping program that allows participants to learn how to interact with bees at the ministry's own rooftop beehive. St. Columba's House, in partnership with the United Church Ministries, Montreal City Mission, and the Montreal Presbytery Justice and Global Ecumenical Relationship Committee, has also created the Green Church Project to engage ministries in an ecological practice. Together through our mission service support, we can celebrate with St. Columba's House all the lives that have been transformed and look ahead to innovation for the future. We give thanks for its 100-year history and look forward to with what it has to do in the next 100 years. If mission service giving is already a regular part of your life, thank you so much. If you have not given, please join me in making a mission and service giving a regular part of your life of faith. Loving our neighbor is at the heart of our mission and service.
Thank you. Please remember the work of the church around the world and here at home in your offering today in the box in the lobby. Lots of stuff in the bulletin today. Thank you, everyone participating today. Thanks to everyone who brought potluck for lunch today. Please do stay. There's lots. And it's also a FunScript day. So Andrea would love to see you with your FunScript orders. There's forms in the lobby if you need them, or if you just want to know more about FunScript, like say what the specials are this month, Andrea would be happy to help you with that. Even though she might now have to look those up, right? Sorry, yeah, okay, sorry. Tomorrow night, Contemporary Church. The theme is Fruits of the Spirit. So if you'd like to see some interesting videos, hear some interesting music, and hear some interesting discussion. There's always lots of each of those things. So please do join us tomorrow night at 7. So this is actually Environment Sunday, by the way, on the church calendar. We focused on Sabbath more today than the environment necessarily, but it's all part of that, isn't it, really? And so I just want to draw your attention to something you might have seen outside on the side of the building here. Ben and Grant have been working on that grant, although this grant might also be involved. No, okay. Ben and Grant have been working on a rainwater catchment system for the community garden here, and also for the community garden annex, which is behind Jamie Martindale's house. Just on the other side of the school there. There's some raised beds back there. You might have seen the pictures on Facebook. If you didn't, you should, because The preschool kids did an awesome job. It was, you have to see what they did. But this is Ben and Grant working on this water catchment thing. They've been trying to crowdsource the funding for it, including having people just randomly walk into BDSS and hand them money, and some other donations and things. And I think you're still a couple of $100 short, right, of the total cost. So if you are interested in supporting that project directly, Ben and Grant are the guys to see to talk to about it, but make sure that you give your money to Andrea, because, you know. I'm kidding. But they're just doing an awesome job of this too. So if you're interested in being involved, you should talk to them for sure. Or if you have some wisdom you want to share with them about different ways that we can sort of maximize all of this. But they're the guys to talk to, and so thank you guys for doing that. It's awesome. June the 21st is National Aboriginal Day, and on that day in the evening at 6:30 we're going to have a Kairos blanket exercise, which is right here, by the way. We're going to move the pews and we're going to do it right here. And it's an amazing experience to have. If you haven't done it, it's an amazing experience of learning the history from a different perspective and experiencing it as you do it. It's a really interesting, interactive way of doing it. Unfortunately, we also only can have a maximum of 50 people involved for this. So if you are interested, please speak to me or Andrea. We need to make sure it's free, of course, but you need to register because we need to know how many people are involved before we start. So please do make sure that you register as soon as you can. And June the 21st, it really is worth experiencing. There is a video. If you go to Kairos's website, there's a video that talks about it, and people talk about their experience of doing it as well. So feel free to have a look at that too. But that's June the 21st, 6:30 in the evening. Mary Ellen has an announcement about Bar Harbor, I think. Yeah. Would you like to, Mike?
I just want to say, I'm sure all of you know that Carrie is the rep.
Talk into that.
I have such a loud voice.
Not for anybody who's watching.
Carrie's the rep for Bar Harbor Camp for our church here. And she works very, very, very hard at it, like hundreds of hours a year. Anyway, she had, this past week, she sent us, her family, an email. And she was telling us that last fall she had worked with the Foster Parent Association in Red Deer really hard to try and set up them coming over to use the camp over there. And it didn't all work out for them to come this year because, of course, it's government, it's foster parents, it's foster kids, it's lots of paperwork. Anyway, they were so appreciative of all the work that she's done, because they will be coming there next year, that they made a donation to the Bar Harbor camp of $5,000. Yeah. And I just, wow. Carrie never toots her own horn, ever. So I'm tooting her horn for her. Because she does work so hard at it. And their fundraiser this year is at Bar Harbor itself. They've had it in Stettler the last 3 years. But this year it's at Bar Harbor itself. And it's a steak supper night. And people can go there and camp if they want for the whole weekend, or you can do whatever you want. You can do it however you want. I'm just going to go and have supper and come home, but there'll be people taking their trailers out there. There'll probably be people staying right in the cabins over there if they want to. Bar Harbor is a very old camp. I went there. Sheila went there. All my brothers, my sister, my brothers went there too, and
it's like
it's
a pioneer
been
camp
for a long time. Yeah, it's older than me.
Wow. Yeah, it is pioneers.
Yeah, I think so. Anyway, so I'm going to put this poster out on it's on the 23rd of June. I'm going to put the poster out. Also, another thing that happened this week for us, 5 years ago, I started on a plan of finding out my heritage on my dad's side of the family, on both his mother's side and his father's side. And I got my Métis status because of it, because my dad was Métis. None of us knew that. It was never, ever mentioned in our family to any of us, because in those days people were ashamed. Anyway, this week all 4 of my kids got their status, so they're all Métis.
We are also Bar Harbor. We have such a strong connection to Bar Harbor. Bastrop Concrete actually, I think, has donated materials, and people from the congregation here have worked over there. People have attended there, either their kids or even apparently some of us have actually attended there. Did they have tents then? No. So we have quite a connection. So please do seriously consider going to the dinner on the Saturday night. If you're somebody who likes to camp, by the way, they are encouraging people who like to camp to bring an RV or a tent or whatever and stay overnight. And they're going to have a service on Sunday morning, which we will likely be participating in. You'll hear more about that. But they're inviting congregations from around Bar Harbor to not have a service that Sunday morning and instead go there. So we may well be doing that, so watch out for more information about that. But please do consider buying a ticket for the dinner. It is a very worthwhile program and camp to support, for sure. Are there any other announcements this morning? Please join me in the closing.